Hi, it's Zeke with the Eastside Church of Christ in Baytown, Texas. Thanks for joining us in our Eastside Bible reading for the week of April 19th to 25th, 2020. This week's reading will take us all the way through the book of Ruth, as well as through chapters 1 through 8 of the book of 1 Samuel, chapters 3 through 7 of the book of Acts, as well as 3 Psalms. You know, when you look into the book of Ruth, I don't know anybody who doesn't like that book. Even though it takes place during the dark days of the Judges, remember that book? It's like a ray of sunshine, a breath of fresh air. Ruth reminds us of just a bunch of admirable traits like loyalty, diligence, humility, all the things that Christians today need to serve the Lord well. And then as we move into the book of 1 Samuel, we move from the drama of one woman, Ruth, to the drama in the life of another woman, Hannah. Hannah was a woman, obviously, who loved the Lord. But when you start reading through her story, you notice how the people in her life were somewhat incomplete as far as their relationship with her went. Her husband, Elkanah, he loved her, but he didn't quite understand her. Elkanah's other wife, Peninnah, understood Hannah a little better, but it's evident she didn't love her at all. But God both loved her and understood her, and granted to her the child that she yearned for. And as this child grew up, Samuel, she gave him back to the Lord to serve him in the tabernacle. And as he grew up in the priest's house, Eli, as a young boy, he got a message from the Lord. And that first message to Samuel was not a pleasant one. God told Samuel that he was going to deal with the ungodliness in Eli's house. And then Samuel went and told Eli the entire message. He didn't hold anything back. And maybe that tells us something about how we need to, as Paul put it, tell the whole counsel of God. Well, Samuel did that. And then later on, as Samuel grew up and became not only a judge, but also a prophet, the Israelites, as fickle as ever, come to him and they demand a king. But don't miss the reason why they demanded a king. In spite of the fact that God was already their king, Scripture tells us in chapter 8 that they wanted to be like all the other nations. Now, I'm sure there are lessons for us there as well. Then as we follow the events in the New Testament, in the book of Acts, we see a vibrant church, a growing church, a church that cares and shares with one another. But then we also see sin and pride rear their ugly heads in chapter 5. We see how God dealt decisively with that sin in chapter 5. We see the boldness of the apostles and their willingness to suffer persecution for their courageous proclamation of the gospel. And we also see the murderous intent of the enemies of that gospel, of their religious opposition in the death of the first Christian martyr, Stephen. And then, in that chapter 7, we get a glimpse of a young man named Saul, somebody who we'll read a whole lot more about in the pages to come. As we read through the Psalms this week, Psalm 23 is a familiar one. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Reminds me of that story of the little boy who couldn't quite remember the opening line to that psalm, and so he just said, the Lord's my shepherd, that's all I want. And certainly that psalm helps us to realize that as long as we have God, everything else will work out. Psalm 37 presents a contrast to us between those who trust in God and those who trust in themselves. And of course, there are lessons to learn in that psalm as well. And finally, Psalm 120 is an appeal to God for deliverance from those who don't love God or his people. And it seems like the same kind of prayer that you and I would maybe utter today. There are people who don't love him, who don't love us. And because of the stand that we take for right and truth and morality, it seems that they like us even less. And that psalm is a reminder to us that as long as we rely on God, he'll deliver us from the trouble. He may not take it away completely, but he'll give us a way to get through it. Trust in him. Thanks for joining us in this week's Eastside Bible reading, and we'll see you next week with another video on next week's reading. God bless you.